The cop that stops it.
How did I not play that in the last segment? We got to put that back in post-production or something, man. Obviously, O'Reilly wanted to say this to the cop.
End of this.
But he couldn't. In fact, the cop told him,
I'm coming to your house. I'm coming to your house.
And no, all right. JR during the break was talking about how mad O'Reilly must have been when he first found out. You're sleeping around? And you're sleeping with who? Oh, God, you know how angry he gets. Yeah, I bet you know what his wife told the sheriff? We'll do it live! It ain't right. It ain't right. All right. So, anyway, his personal life is not the relevant part. And we're bad people for being amused. So, now we move forward to Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney's taking a punch at everybody you can find. Condoleezza Rice, Colin Powell famously. They got into a fight. Colin Powell says it's cheap shots. Cheney says, and then what? Cheney's like, so what? Of course. Yeah, I went after Powell. What are you going to do about it? Tough guy, right? And then, he had some shots with George Bush, but now he's going after John McCain quite significantly. He says that he knew at one point that McCain's candidacy was in massive trouble. And he was talking about how when McCain decided that he was going to stop his campaign, pause it, to come back to Washington to fix things. Remember when we were having the great economic crash and McCain basically panicked? And Cheney was, and this is actually a rare, decent point that Cheney's making, thought, okay, fine, but what's your plan, right? Because that seems like a bold thing to do, but you got to come back to Washington, and how are you going to solve it? So then he recounts what happened when McCain asked for a meeting with the president with congressional leadership. He says, quote, we wanted McCain to win, so when he asked the president to convene the congressional leadership in the cabinet room of the White House to discuss the financial crisis, the president did it. He called Senator Obama, McCain's opponent, and asked him to be there as well. What unfolded that day in the West Wing was likely unique in the annals of American presidential contests. When the president turned to Senator McCain to speak, he passed. Since he had called for the meeting in the first place, that was a surprise. After a few other people expressed their opinions, most of them negative, the president came back to McCain. This time he spoke, but only for himself. It was a marked contrast with Obama, whose words carried the authority of all the Democrats in the room. Senator McCain added nothing of substance. It was entirely unclear why he returned to Washington and why he'd wanted congressional leadership called together. I left the cabinet room when the meeting was over, thinking the Republican presidential ticket was in trouble. Man, Cheney, he's like that crazy guy that's in lockup, and like even the other bad guys can't trust him. Like the minute he's the one with the mask, and people are like, oh, watch out, dude, here comes Cheney. And he'll find a way to like gnaw through the mask, and then while McCain's walking through the yard, shiv him in the back and let him bleed out. What was the need for you to tell us this story? No, look, I think it's interesting. In this regard, do I believe Cheney? Yeah. And look, I actually believe a lot of what Cheney says. They're just horrible, right? So he says, yeah, I waterboarded people. So what, right? Okay, I believe him when he says that. He's like, yeah, I got Colin Powell fired. So what? I believe him when he says that. It's just he shouldn't have done any of those things. Now, in this regard, when you look at this story, it's devastating for McCain. And it makes you think, as many problems as we had with Obama, imagine McCain being in charge, being like, oh, I'm going to call an emergency meeting. What are you calling it for, John? I don't know. I'm going to let everybody speak first, and then I don't have any plan. The guy was a disaster and ran a disastrous campaign. And there's a rare situation where Cheney calls someone out, and he's, not only is he accurate, but he's kind of right in his analysis. So it's tough for McCain. McCain, when asked about it, said, Cheney's served his country well. Didn't really dispute it, but he was classy about it at least. Okay, so now on to other Cheney revelations. When asked about the Iraq War, he says, I think it was sound policy and eliminated a very serious problem. What was the problem? I don't know, Saddam Hussein. I didn't like the guy. Okay, he didn't add that last part, but basically, they didn't attack us. What was the problem you were eliminating? Anyway, well, come on. You got to at least admit that we had some issues with our reputation. Quote, I don't think it damages our reputation around the world. Okay, now see, this is the exact opposite, where Dick Cheney lives in an alternate world. Like, so when he calls out those people, I don't dispute his accounting of the particulars in those cases. Colin Powell doesn't dispute it either. Well, actually, to be fair, he does. Colin Powell says the one part that he definitely disagrees with is he says Cheney didn't get me fired. I resigned on my own. Okay, you can quibble over that. Anyway, but this is alternate reality stuff. In Cheney's world, it's like, oh my God, we went into Iraq. It was awesome. What? Reputation around the world? No, that helped us, didn't it? Maybe it did with John Bolton and Scooter Libby, but it didn't with anybody else. Anyway, so now here comes the fun part. Dick Cheney's on the Today Show. Matt Lauer's going to ask him a couple of questions and about torture, and I think actually they're very good questions. Let's see Cheney's response.
So let me ask you this question. I asked President Bush the same question. If an American citizen were to be taken into captivity in Iran, for example, and the government of Iran were to look at that person and say, we think you're a spy for the U.S. or you're here to carry out a covert operation, would it be okay for the Iranian government to waterboard that American citizen?
Well, we probably would object to it.
On the grounds that it's torture?
On the grounds that we have obligations towards our citizens, and that we do everything we can to protect our citizens and to put them through a process that we think is appropriate.
So why was it okay for us to use what most people would say was torture against terror suspects?
Well, remember, first of all, these were not American citizens.
That's a great answer. That's the rest of the world is going to love us for that answer. They're like, it's like, you got to understand something. The people we tortured weren't Americans. So who gives a damn? No, of course Iran doesn't get to torture Americans, doesn't get to waterboard Americans, because they're Americans. Hello, Matt Lauer, anything up there? The pomposity of this and the arrogance is overwhelming. He continues.
If the government of Iran were to capture someone and say, we have reason to believe that you're a spy or you're carrying out an operation that could be damaging to our country, would you object, or would you say they did what they had to do to get the information they needed at the time?
Well, I think we would object because we wouldn't expect an American citizen to be operating that way.
That's fantastic, man. Well, that would be an American citizen, and by definition, an American citizen is always innocent. And by definition, non-American citizens are always guilty. Matt, what's with these dense questions? Well, one thing you got to hand to Cheney is that he just doesn't give a damn. He's like, okay, I'm on this side. I'm going to torture everybody I find. If you torture one of mine, I'm going to be outraged. And I like the no true Scotsman line of thinking that he's using. No true Scotsman would do that. No true American citizen would be a spy anyway. Like we don't have spies, right, Dick Cheney? Right? His hypocrisy is amazing in its breadth. I tip my hat to you, Dick Cheney, for surprising us yet again with a, yeah, what are you going to do about it? We're Americans, you're not. Gee, I wonder why people didn't like the Bush-Cheney administration around the world. Can't quite figure it out. All right. By the way, when asked, hey, why did you take some shots at Bush, and why does your book disagree with with Bush's book in some instances? He said, well, come on, if we wrote the same things, people would accuse us of a conspiracy. Lucas here made a great point, one of our producers. He said, yeah, that's why we didn't want you to testify together during the 9/11 Commission. You remember when they did that? They testified in secret, holding hands, Bush and Cheney at the same time, so they wouldn't screw up any part of their story. But now when it comes to Cheney taking shots at Bush, so, oh, well, we can't do anything in unison. That would seem like a conspiracy. Well, you would know. By the way, one other thing. There's so many things about the Cheney book. Let me tell you just one last thing on it, and then we got to go. On the Second Amendment, George Bush administration in 2008 disagreed with a court decision in Washington about handguns. Cheney, being the disloyal vice president that he has always been, he's always been disloyal no matter which administration he was serving and in which role. He's only loyal when it serves his purposes. When it's not, well, has no interest in being loyal. Went out in public and agreed with the court and said the Bush administration is wrong. But he signed his brief as the president of the Senate and not the vice president. So he could feel like, well, I wasn't disloyal to the president. I said how incredibly wrong the president was as in my role as the president of the Senate, which is what the vice president is. By the way, Scalia said once we got that note, we knew which way to go. At least he's being honest about it. Scalia's like, all right, Ideology on the court? Who cares? Principle? What name? So, Dick Cheney, what do you want me to do? Oh, that way? Of course, I'll vote that way. Fantastic. All right, now, on to matters of serious foreign policy, right? What Dick Cheney claims to care about, but didn't actually do anything about. By the way, when asked to justify the Iraq War and all the torture, et cetera, what was Dick Cheney's number one defense? He said, look, we kept you safe for 7 years. How long was their term? It was 8 years, right, JR? We kept you safe for 7 years. Oh, right, that 1 year where we had the world's worst terrorist attack on our soil. Right. And by the way, this is what I think JR and I were talking about yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. I was talking about it with somebody off air. Obama constantly going around like, oh, there was nothing I could do. Joe, please reelect me. But God, there was, golly gee whiz, there's nothing. There's just nothing I could do. Bush and Cheney, this is when they were going for re-election. They're like, what? Are you alive? You're alive, aren't you? Well, then shut up and vote for us. What's with the yappity yap? We kept you safe. You haven't died in the last 3 years. Shut up and vote for Bush and Cheney. That was their main argument. You're not dead, are you? Vote for us. Is Obama going to use that? No. I'm going to get to that later in the program. All right. So now we just found out that the CIA apparently has killed the number 2 man in Al-Qaeda, Atiyah Abd al-Rahman. Now, you remember all they used to do was kill the number 3 guy. Well, they've now moved up the chain. Since bin Laden is dead, they now keep killing the number 2 guy, okay? In fact, they killed the number 2 guy a little while back. That was Sheikh Saeed al-Masri, and now the new number 2 is also dead. By the way, if you're not keeping track of the brackets here at Al-Qaeda, Ayman al-Zawahiri has been promoted to the number 1 guy, replacing bin Laden, of course, who is also dead. But you know what, as we see these reports, and I know through the Bush years I was fairly skeptical of all of the number 3s that we killed, as we killed apparently 182 number 3s, and they just kept springing up more and more. Well, they actually finally, in this New York Times article about the drone strike that killed this guy, had a decent explanation as to why that happens. It turns out the former number 3, the current number 2 guy, is the operations chief who takes the messages from leadership, whether it's bin Laden or Zawahiri, and then communicates that to the foot soldiers. And since he's that guy, it's easier to trace him because he's the one sending out all the messages. So they trace him and then put a bomb on his head. And I was like, oh, you know what? That kind of makes sense. I get it. But then I always think, why don't they trace it back to the top guy, bin Laden or Zawahiri? Obviously, that's harder, right? And that's why it took us, partly why it took us so long with bin Laden. But it's interesting. It at least gives some explanation why that's a pretty precarious spot. And if I was the next number 2 guy at Al-Qaeda, well, you better watch out, man. Look up at the sky, because something's coming at some point, okay? At this point, you got to give us credit. It's near guaranteed that it's coming. Okay, so, and now, look, by the way, from time to time I disagree with progressives on the use of drone strikes. This is why I like drone strikes, okay? Now, I know they got their downsides, and on another day we'll have a fine debate about it, right? But these Al-Qaeda number 2, number 3 guys got to be in a panic, man. You hear a low humming sound, that's probably the last thing you heard. So, and this, look, you got to separate it out, the propaganda from what's real. But I have a significant sense from these news reports that it is real that we have significantly weakened the leadership of at least the original Al-Qaeda, which was in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Now there's new leadership in Yemen and Somalia, etc. And we've hit those guys a couple of times as well. But I'm just giving you all the facts. Okay, now, we often talk to you about corruption, not just within the government, but more specifically within the Pentagon. And of course, you're not allowed to point that out if you're in the rest of the press, because then, you know, how dare you? Are you not supporting the troops? But wait a minute. Who the Pentagon is giving contracts to, especially private contractors, has nothing to do with the troops. But for 8 years under Bush, we got, support the troops! That dude doesn't even have a yellow ribbon on his car. Coming in here talking about corruption at the Pentagon. How dare you, right? Well, one thing that we've been complaining about all along is the no-bid contracts. We're like, wait, why do... I thought the conservatives wanted a free market. I thought they wanted competition. I thought they loved capitalism. Why are we giving no-bid contracts to these contractors that are well connected to people that are working inside the government and inside the Pentagon? Well, the excuse back then was, you think it's easy fighting a war we needlessly started? No, we started it in a panic and we didn't really have a plan, so we had to immediately give out those contracts. What could we do? Now, okay, look, you might think that's a weak excuse, but at least it's something. They just started the war, right? And back in those days, there was about $50 billion worth of no-bid contracts. So obviously, now that we've been going at these wars for a long time, 7 to 10 years, Iraq and Afghanistan, well, obviously there aren't any no-bid contracts left, right? You can see where this is going. No, what's happened as the no-bid contracts have nearly tripled. Now there's $140 billion in no-bid contracts. There's no excuse for that because obviously these cost us a tremendous amount of money, and the reporting is, are there cheaper alternatives? Absolutely. More efficient alternatives? Absolutely. But hey, you know what? That guy who gave the no-bid contract, you're going to be shocked to find out one day he's going to be working for the guy he gave the no-bid contract to at a very healthy price. $140 billion. No free market, no nothing. Just whoever has better contacts at the Pentagon. By the way, it's nearly 50% of the contracts that we give out are no bids. Now, what does that lead to? One of the things it leads to is a new report that it turns out we wasted $30 billion in Iraq and Afghanistan. Who could have figured? Among the things that we wasted was on wartime contracting. Again, nearly half the people that we have in these countries, Iraq and Afghanistan, are not troops. They're private contractors. And some of those have gotten no-bid contracts, and then shockingly enough, they did not perform very efficiently, and we wasted $30 billion and don't know where it went. But shush, support the Pentagon, support the troops, bow your head. It's not like we live in a democracy where we should challenge our government. Okay, you tell me when you see this in the mainstream press. All right, by the way, more disastrous news. Apparently, we were making some headway with the Taliban. We were doing secret negotiations with them. As you can tell, they're no longer secret because I'm telling you. How did we find out? It turns out Hamid Karzai threw us under a bus. The leader of Afghanistan, his government leaked out that information because he got jealous. He didn't want to get cut out of the talks. He didn't want the Taliban to make a secret deal with the U.S. Once they found out, they alerted the press, and the guy doing those talks ran away to Germany. Now we have no contact with the Taliban. Fantastic. More endless war in Afghanistan. Thanks a lot, Karzai. We really appreciate it. Arab League is proposing a peace plan for Syria. Syria is pissed. They're like, what? We thought we were part of the Arab League. They're like, yeah, you were until you started causing everybody trouble. I'm telling you, Bashar al-Assad is a little bit on thin ice. By the way, if you weren't a little concerned about that already, here's the reason why everybody in the area should be concerned. It turns out Syria is #1 in number of chemical weapons in the world. Oops. Mustard gas, sarin gas, some dating back all the way to World War I, and some very modern. And so apparently they have the biggest stockpile of chemical weapons in the world. Lovely. Let's hope very much that they do not use it. I'm going to give you a quick heads up on something, and then we're going to come back and talk about Rick Perry and other heinous plans by the Republicans. That's China. It's just beginning now. Just to warm you up here, okay? I am now seeing reports pop up all over the place. China, be very concerned about China. They always need a boogeyman, right? And I think I'm getting the sense that with the death of bin Laden, a decision's been made in some room in Washington where the right-wing think tanks got together and they're like, yeah, this Al-Qaeda thing's getting played out, man. There's like 3 of them left in Pakistan. We need a new enemy. And so all of a sudden, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for East Asia, Michael Schiffer, comes out and says China is a, quote, destabilizing force in the Asia-Pacific region. They have increased their defense spending by nearly 13%. Ooh. We increase our defense spending by much more on a consistent basis. By the way, we have 6 times the amount of military spending that China does, even though we have a quarter of the population. So here comes another boogeyman, right? By the way, why do they need a boogeyman? Because that defense industry that I've been telling you about, they need to get paid. And they can't get paid unless everybody's scared to death that there's an imminent takeover either by, what, the communists or the global jihadists or now big red China. So that boogeyman is around the corner headed your way. All right, Young Turks. All right, back on the Young Turks. We spent the whole break talking about possums and raccoons. What's more dangerous? Come on, possums. You crazy? They look vicious. That tail is disgusting.
But possums they have a very severe disability, and their disability is sight, right? So if you want a possum to not attack you, all you do is you light a flashlight in its eyes, and it immediately goes blind.
Oh, I didn't know that. They're like vampires.
Yeah,
See, but that kind of makes them a little scarier, too.
It doesn't make them scarier. Possums don't scare me, they disgust me.
Right.
And so do massive Gambian rats.
Okay, fair enough. We've now concluded that. We can move forward.
All right. The Department of Justice has removed the head of the ATF. His name is Kenneth Melson, and the reason why they did that is because he was in charge at the time that the Fast and Furious thing was happening with the ATF. They were trying to track weapons that would go into Mexico, except they didn't end up tracking the weapons, but they went into Mexico anyway.
Yeah, that was a bit of a disastrous program. I'm going to take credit here. The Young
Don't
Turks,
take credit yet. Hold on.
Damn it.
Sorry. Now, they removed him from the ATF. He is no longer the head of the ATF. However, he is now a senior advisor for the Office of Legal Policy.
No, well, there you go then.
So you fail at something, but you're still a senior advisor for the Office of Legal Policy. How does that make any sense? This is just another example of them, trying to, avoid responsibility in a way, kind of
But
like.
don't piss anybody off.
Exactly.
The total middle course Obama. It's a classic Obama move. So listen, we did this story probably more than any other show, mainly because Anna was obsessed by it. Okay, so we talked about, look, they did this program. All right, we're going to do 2,000 serious guns. We're going to send them into Mexico. We're going to track them. Except one little wrinkle in the plan. We're not going to track them. Okay, and then they use those weapons everywhere, and then people got killed, including our agents, and then everybody got promoted. And it was like, oh, come on. So finally, there's some consequence. The guy gets fired, and then, as you can see, of course, immediately thereafter, schwang, wang, wang, he gets another awesome position.
He does, exactly. He gets another position of power, and he doesn't really face any real consequences. And, the Department of Justice is saying, well, he's not necessarily the one who signed off on the Fast and Furious procedure. However, he was the head of the ATF, so we got to give him a little slap on the wrist, a little slappy slap, except the slap is he gets to be in charge of an awesome position.
Here's my guess. I bet he didn't even take a pay cut. I bet he gets paid at least the same amount in the new position.
No, he's probably getting paid more.
You got to keep it real, right? And then the guy who actually came up with the Fast and Furious program, we've reported on another show because we're obsessed with the story, he got a promotion. So, look, it's serious, man. Those weapons wound up killing our agents. And, I mean, what kind of a dumbass does a program where, it's like, it's not a little mistake. It's like, oops, we forgot to do the main thing in the program, which was to track the weapons. And oops, we just gave it to the Mexican drug cartels. I mean, you can't screw up a program any worse than they did. And then the big final consequence is that somebody gets transferred to another job where they're probably making just as much money.
A Border Patrol agent died because of this.
Right.
It just drives me crazy.
Steve-O.
Heck of a job, Brownie.
Yeah, that's how it works. By the way, let me bring that up again. During Hurricane Irene, here comes Brownie again. He goes on Fox News every time and talks about, oh, you know what, this time he was saying, Eric Cantor is right, we should take money out of FEMA. Brown, the guy who screwed up FEMA during Hurricane Katrina, is saying we should take money out of FEMA and give it because it needs to be offset, et cetera, right? Now, why do they have this guy who is one of the biggest clowns in American governmental history? Certainly, well, that's too much of an exaggeration, but certainly in the last 10 years, right? Because, as I've told you before, it's actually a brilliant plan. Because the minute Brownie says it, everybody in the press repeats it, right? Because they're like, oh, get a load of Brownie, what an idiot. How could Brownie say that? But they repeat it and repeat it until everybody doesn't remember where they heard it. But they're like, yeah, shouldn't we do offsets and take money out of FEMA during, hurricanes and disasters? That's the Fox News strategy, and it's brilliant. And that's how they circulate these ideas. And what do they care about his credibility? They don't care at all. They just trot him out for their own purposes. It's devious, but makes a lot of sense. All right, next.
Police in the UK are pressuring news outlets to release videotapes that show rioters in London. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to find out and identify who these rioters were. They want those people to serve severe consequences, possibly prison time. And what I love about this story is that so far, media outlets are not caving into the pressure. They will not release the videotapes. They will not give the police officers any type of footage. And they're saying, look, we are not a news source that gathers surveillance and gathers evidence for your purpose, for the police, right? We're doing this because we want to inform the public. And if you want to obtain these videos, you have to go through the court process. So we'll see what happens. Police officials are likely to go through court to obtain these videos, and hopefully the courts rule against them.
Well, I'm a little mixed on this, believe it or not. Don't get me wrong; I totally support what the papers and the news outlets are doing on television, because they're right. You absolutely positively have to go through the proper court proceedings. They're not supposed to just be another branch of the government. They're not supposed to be a branch of the police, right? The media is totally separate and is supposed to keep a check on the police. But at the same time, for example, if they captured a crime as severe as murder or rape, I think most of us would agree, hey, you know what? Once they go through the proper procedure, you'd probably want to hand that over to the cops.
Right, but we're talking about apples and oranges. We're not talking about murder and rape. We're talking about people rioting in London. Of course, there was significant property damage. There were definitely some crimes or some laws that were broken, and I understand that, and I can understand police wanting those people to face criminal charges for that, right? But at the same time, right now you have David Cameron being so strict and so tough on these people who are rioting. For instance, there were two 18-year-olds that were sentenced to 4 years in prison for making a Facebook page telling people to gather at a certain location for the riots, right? They put down that Facebook page hours later, but they got a 4-year prison sentence for it. So what's going to happen if they obtain this footage? Are innocent people who didn't really cause any problem at all but were part of the protest, are they going to serve prison time? What's going to happen? I just don't think that the footage is going to be used for something constructive.
No, you make a great case, Anna, because if the police have already abused their authority in some cases, we don't want to help them abuse their authority any further. So I think it's fair to say, hey, let the courts make that judgment call. That's what they're supposed to do, and see where it comes out on it. I understand why the cops want it. I understand why the media resists. And hopefully they use smart judgment in the court system to figure out who's right and who's wrong, depending on the instances.
Can I talk about The Guardian for just 2 seconds? Okay, The Guardian is one of the papers.
1,000, 2,000.
Okay, just listen. The Guardian.
Next.
I freaking love The Guardian.
So do I.
It's one of my favorite publications because, by the way, it's one of the publications that's being pressured by the police, right? And they're not giving in at all. But they do such great reporting, not only on issues that matter to the UK, but also on issues that matter to the US. They do better coverage of the US than the US media does.
Do you know why?
Why?
They're independent.
I didn't know that.
The Guardian is run, and this is absolutely critical. It's not a coincidence that the Guardian runs one of the most reliable papers literally in the world. It was a fund that was set up to make sure that they could do independent journalism, and it's a trust fund, and it's a nonprofit. So
that's great.
So it isn't colored by any of the other motivations, like being part of a mega corporation that needs government breaks, et cetera, et cetera. That's why the Guardian is so good. And Salon Magazine, for example, online, best columnists, David Sirota, Glenn Greenwald, Joan Walsh, Alex Perini, goes on and on. Robert Reich writes on there often. Why? They're independent, right? They're not part of a major corporation that has interests that are outside of the readers. The Guardian, the Salon, et cetera. You can always come back to the same things. That's why when you hear people talk about independent media, Bill Moyers does it all the time. There's a real reason for that, because the proof is in the pudding, okay? You see, that produces the right results, the others do not. It's all about incentives and disincentives, man. We say it all the time in the show. It's real. That's why you get great stories out of the Guardian.
Absolutely. All right, Aisha Gaddafi, Gaddafi's only biological daughter, is an interesting character, but she's a bit of a mixed bag. It turns out that rebels obtained a photo album of Aisha Gaddafi, and they released it to the public. And I didn't know this, but she's known as North Africa's Claudia Schiffer.
Really? Well, let's be the judge of that. Let's take a look. Does she? Oh, nice mixed bags.
You're the worst. Okay, so
That ain't right.
Aisha Gaddafi is actually educated in the West. She has a Western education as a lawyer. So that sounds kind of good, impressive. But
God bless.
here's where the mixed bag comes in. She was part of the defense for the Saddam Hussein trial. She's a goodwill ambassador, which is good.
That's great.
Right? Except she defends her father, of course, and some shady, sketchy organizations such as the IRA and various other groups with poor records on human rights.
Yeah, I like that euphemism. Like her father and the IRA killed civilians. That's colloquially what we call terrorists, right? And look, I know a lot of people think the IRA had the right objective, but hey, the Palestinians want an independent state. That's the right objective. Doesn't mean you're using the right means to get to that objective, right? But when it's all of a sudden your dad and people like him, like, well, come on, not so bad. So look, I like that she got an education. I like that she's trying. The looks are, God bless, and apparently the intelligence is good enough to get into the schools, become a lawyer, et cetera, et cetera. I don't even mind her defending the bad guys like Saddam Hussein. Somebody's got to defend him. Gaddafi's daughter is actually a fairly logical choice, right? But in the end, the bottom line is she's Gaddafi's daughter. And Gaddafi was the dictator for 42 years. And of course, she goes to bat for him, which means you go to bat against the people of Libya, who he's been, in some ways, oppressing for the last 42 years. So we can't have it, no matter how much you dyed your hair blonde and had a number of bags. Okay, anyway, but let's have a wrong conversation about her for a second, and then come back and talk about the rest of Gaddafi's family. J.R. Jackson, Jesus Godoy, TYT Supreme Court. Guilty or not guilty? Obviously, I'm strictly talking about looks here.
I'm a little confused as to which one is the good one.
Guilty is she's a dirty, dirty girl.
No, don't say that.
Well, on the right slide, she's not guilty. In the middle slide, she's guilty.
Yeah, you see what I'm saying? Quite guilty in the middle slide. And in the left slide, she's pensive, she's thoughtful, and a little erotic.
Guilty.
Guilty. I'm going with guilty. Yeah. She's trying hard. God bless. All right. That was wrong and unacceptable. Now, back to Gaddafi's family. Gaddafi's wife, his daughter, Aisha Gaddafi, and his two of his sons, Hannibal and Mohammed, have run away.
Yes.
They are now they're now in Algeria. Okay. This means several things. One, Gaddafi's in a world of trouble. You don't send your wife and your kids away unless you think the house is about to burn down, okay? And it's not, Algeria didn't even know they were coming. They show up and they're like, yeah, we're kind of here, right? Algeria's like, what are we supposed to do with you? They're neutral. They're like, okay, fine, sure, come on in, right? That's a really bad sign for Gaddafi. That dude's on borrowed time, man. It's just a matter of time, no question. Second of all, Mohammed and Hannibal got to be a little embarrassed. I mean, their other brothers, like Saif al-Islam, etc., are in the middle of the fight. They're going out and talking about how they're going to burn the enemies, and they're the rats, and they're going to kill them and crush them, etc. They're fighting against giant rats with pockets, and etc. And the dude's name is Hannibal. It's like, oh, I'm Hannibal. I'll see you in Algeria, right? And the other guy's name is Mohammed, right? And when they caught Mohammed, you remember they briefly caught him. And the rebels did. And he said, what? Oh, this thing, I'm for the Libyan people, man. That's who I'm for, I'll tell you that, right?
Right.
And somehow he managed to escape. He's like, I'm now for the Algerian people. Okay, he's like, whoever wants to stay, whoever wants to run. Those are two misnamed dudes, okay? But who are now, by the way, safe and alive in Algeria. Probably the right move.
Maybe they're not the bravest or most courageous, but I think they're the smartest.
Yeah, no question.
I would definitely run.
It's not, by the way, that's Saif al-Islam. I don't want you to get me wrong. I ain't on his side, and my guess is not going to turn out well for him.
It's like, I guess the name is kind of like compensating. You have a big name and you don't live up to it. Maybe it gets you from the beginning.
Uh-oh.
Who else did that?
Who named their son a big name? Listen, man, if I'm in the middle of a fight and my Prometheus Maximus says, who wants to stay, who want to run? Like, what happened? Where you go? Hey, bro, where you go? Say, yeah. See, you wouldn't want to be, Daddy. No, but look, I think as any decent dad, I'd want him to run for his life. Are you kidding me, man?
I mean, come on. Maybe a first school fight in 6th grade, the bully walks up and he goes, "Who do you think you are?" "I'm Prometheus Maximus Uger."
Now, who the fuck are you?
You gotta teach him. You gotta teach him an entire speech to say before a fight starts.
Yeah. I am Prometheus Maximus Uger, commander of the armies of the North, general of the Felix Legion, and I shall have my vengeance in this life or the next. Now that wouldn't be bad, right? Right? Okay, anyway, he's a 1-year-old. We've got time. Okay, what's next?
All right, one more story before we go to the break. Daryl Hannah, actress Daryl Hannah, has been arrested for protesting the Keystone pipeline. Mm-hmm. I like that.
Yeah. No, Daryl Hannah tries hard. She's a real environmentalist. She ain't playing.
She is. Now, the reason why she got arrested is because U.S. Park Police asked her to move from a White House sidewalk. She refused to do so, so they arrested her. So far, there's been nearly 100 people who were arrested for protesting this pipeline.
No, actually, since then, it's over 300 now. It might even be over 400 today. Because what they're doing is you can actually protest across the street in the park from the White House. Mm-hmm. But if you protest on the sidewalk, that's apparently an arresting offense. But it's okay. They want to get arrested to draw attention to the cause, which I actually think they've done a terrific job in. For the last 2 weeks, all I read about is the Keystone pipeline. And there are people who are leading it saying, hey, you know what? This is a case for Obama to really stand up, because this is not a decision that goes to Congress. It is only the president's decision. So if he wants to, he can step up for the environmentalists, for all the climate change, etc., all the things that he promised in the campaign, and stop the pipeline. There's no chance in the world that's going to happen. The State Department on Friday already said that they've cleared it.
Right. It does not pose any risk to the environment whatsoever. Don't worry.
No, don't worry about it. The number of spills from the tar sands that come from, it's the tar sands in Canada. The pipeline transports it from there all the way to the Gulf Coast of the United States. The number of spills already in a small portion of a pipeline, this is the Keystone XL, the smaller ones, 16 times the rate of regular oil, the spills are. Okay.
I'm sure it doesn't pose any problem for the environment.
They use the same pipes. It's so stupid, it boggles the imagination, right? And Hillary Clinton's State Department, which is, sign off. Good to go. No problems, no environmental impact whatsoever. We move forward. Okay. Now, look, I talked at length about this on yesterday's show, but I get why they want to do the pipeline, because they're already taking the oil out of the tar sands. They're going to sell it to either China or us, etc. It creates jobs. It's got 175 billion barrels of oil. I think it would be a tough call for any president, even a Democratic president, right? But what I wish they would do is say, hey, you know what? There's a reason why people are upset about this. Maybe we should take some precautions. As much as it hurts global warming, hey, you know what? It's a separate issue, carbon emissions. We should do something about that. But at least, at the very least, for the pipeline, make every precaution so it doesn't spill. Because when it does, it's toxic. It's acidic. It's toxic to begin with. This is even worse. So can we take those precautions? Of course not.
But taking those precautions, I'm assuming, would cost money, and we wouldn't want to do that.
No, God forbid. We wouldn't want the oil companies paying a little bit more money. So Daryl Hannah and all the other people who have been arrested, unfortunately, likely their protests will fall on deaf ears, as usual, in the Obama administration. That will get approved wholeheartedly.
And a quick clarification on what I said earlier. 100 people were arrested on Tuesday alone.
Yes.
So that's what I misread.
Okay. All right, God bless. Is it time for a break? No.
Yeah, let's take a quick break.
All right, come right back.